I'll call this May meeting of the Community Development, Housing, and General Government Committee to order. We've got some confusion with the sign-up sheets, but we'll manage to work through it. Okay. We always begin with the consent agenda, which we will do now, and I'll get Ms. Stimson to come tell us about each of the cases, many of which are being pulled for one reason or another. And then I'll ask who is here to talk about any of the other cases.
Good afternoon.
Hi, Stephanie. Good
afternoon. Item C1A, 1451 Addison Avenue is being pulled. Item C1C, 210 Wake Drive is being pulled for information. Item C1G, 1695 Ashley School Circle, also pulled for information. Item C2B, Ms. Carretero for 117 North Dunleith Avenue is here to speak. Item C2C, 1318 North Jackson Avenue is being pulled. Item C2D, Mr. Cruz for 421 Jane Avenue is here to speak. C2F, 1220 North Jackson Avenue is being pulled. Item C2G, Carnella Dunlap for 1538 East 22nd Street is present to speak. And item C2I, 942 New Hope Lane is being pulled. It was brought into compliance.
All right. Now, yeah.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Could you repeat the last ones as to in C2, which ones are like information, speak, or pull for, for compliance?
Okay. Pulled for information are C1C, 210 Wake Drive, C1G, 1695 Ashley School Circle, let's see, and C1A, 1A, yes, that was pulled. I'm sorry, no. C1A was pulled for service issues, so we're not going to, that's being pulled for non-consideration, not to be considered today.
So the two things that you have information on for us is 1C and 1G.
What about 2?
1C, 1G, and too many papers. Information. That's 210 Wake Drive and 1695 Ashley School Circle. That is 1G.
Yeah.
1G Ashley School Circle, pull for information. 210 Wake Drive, pull for information. And 4309 Erie Drive, pull for information. That's C2A.
So then the rest of the items that you said were pulled are pulled for
what?
Have been brought into compliance, or we're not considering?
Brought into compliance, or new errors, additional errors have been identified as of today. So we have service issues.
Oh, okay. All right. So tell us about the ones that you have information for us.
Okay. Okay. Starting with 210 Wake Drive, I received a telephone call today from a party who owns the property that lives right beside 210. She lives at 212. She's an investor. She's expressed an interest in acquiring the property and repairing it. Okay. She is making contact. The property is currently has delinquent taxes against it, and she's made contact with the tax office and has agreed to pay those things off. And she's trying to get information on how to get a clear title to the property. So she has expressed interest in acquiring that property.
And then the 1695 Ashley School Circle.
Yes, I spoke with Mr. Cherry this morning. He called to inform me that he is making repairs to the property, and I explained to him about the 90-day period, and he says that the repairs should be done within that time. So we anticipate that property being brought into compliance as well.
Okay. All right, very good. And then the C2I is in compliance.
Yes.
Okay.
And 2A, which is 4309 Erie Drive, the owner called me this morning saying that he is obtaining a demolition permit, and he expects the property to be torn down by the 20th of May.
Okay, very good. Boy, you got hit us with a long list today.
Madam Chair,
Yeah.
I am still, I don't quite get C2 yet. I really don't.
Was that the Wake Drive?
We need to go through C2. That's what I asked for, because we got so many. There was some that were for information, some that was pulled to speak, some that were pulled for compliance. I just need to go through C2 again, please.
Okay. 2A was 4309 Erie Drive. That's the owner has a demolition permit and anticipates it being torn down by the 20th of this month. 2B is here. Ms. Carretero is here to speak regarding Dunleith. 2C is being pulled because of additional heirs were identified who have not been served as of yet. 2D for Barbara Jane Avenue, Mr. Cruz is here to speak. For 2F, we're pulling because of one of the property owners died after publication and has heirs, so we have to go through notification to them. For 2G, 1538 22nd Street, Ms. Dunlap is here to speak. And 2I was brought into compliance. 942 New Hope Lane was brought into compliance.
Okay.
Very good. Mr. Brooks, do you have something you need to add to that?
Yes. On two of those cases that Ms. Stimson mentioned for information, the information was simply to advise you that we had spoken with individuals about the case, not that we were recommending an action, because we would still recommend demolition for them. For instance, on the Wake property, that person contacted us, said they're interested in acquiring, but quite frankly, there's a process that they would have to go through to acquire it. So what she was told was that we would still take this to City Council, recommend demolition, and she would have that 90-day window to do whatever she wanted to do. And if, in fact, she could bring it into compliance within that time period, then we would bring it back, obviously, to have that order rescinded.
Okay. And on the
Erie
Drive,
the Erie Drive property was simply to advise that that person had obtained a demolition permit themselves and indicated that they would tear it down by next Friday, but our recommendation would still be to adopt the order to demolish.
okay, very good. Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
Can I
Now,
ask a quick question? Just under C1, then, under C1, technically, the only one that's being pulled is C1A, right?
that's true. Yes.
Because you're asking for action on everything under C1 except for C1A.
Yeah.
And now, yeah.
Right.
I think that's correct. Now, let me ask anybody in the audience if you are here for 117 Delabrook Road. Oh, okay, and your name? Tara.
You're for Dunleith, not Delabrook.
That's not Delbrook, actually.
Delabrook.
That's the item I was going to ask you.
No, okay, all right.
But I want that item.
Okay, all right. That's, so, Gerwin. No one is here for the Wake Drive. That's the 1206 23rd Street? No. 2703 Glen Haven Lane. 3037 Colgate Drive. And then the Ashley School Circle. No, okay. Let's have Councilmember Montgomery, you have an interest in the Delabrook Road.
Yes, I've spoken with the church there who owns that property, Delabrook Presbyterian Church, and that's actually the parsonage to the church. And in conversation with them, I would ask that that be held in committee and no action at all taken on that item.
All right, we'll hold this in committee. May I have a motion for the remainder?
Madam Chair?
Yeah.
Pardon me, did I mishear? Did you ask about 1206 23rd Street?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. All right. May I have a motion for the remainder
Move
of
for
C1?
approval of the balance of the
C1,
C,
C, D, E, F, and G.
Yeah.
Right.
yes.
Okay.
Motion approved.
Okay.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, now let's move on to C2. We have Erie Drive, which we will, which is supposedly going to be demolished. Ms. Carretero, you are here for Dunleith Avenue. Okay. We're pulling C2C because more errors have been identified. Mr. Cruz is here for Barbara Jane Avenue. Yeah, okay. Goldfloss Street, 1012 Goldfloss. No one is here. Ms. Dunlap is here for 22nd Street. Yeah, okay, thank you. Robin Wood Lane, anybody?
Madam Chairman, there's two of us signed up to speak, and an attorney with us. I'm AJ Gow, he on the list. I'm the joint
Okay, I
property
see.
owner.
Okay,
And Miss Vicki Hudson and her attorney, who's the owner of the property, is right behind me. I don't know who's the counselor.
okay. We'll call on
Barry
you.
Rutledge is the counselor for Miss Hudson.
Okay, we'll call on you when if it comes to that. 3703 Maverick Street. Okay, and 2126 School Street. Okay, except for the ones that are, there are people here to talk about. 1, 2, 3.
I'll move approval of C2A, E, J, and K.
Second.
Very good. Okay, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Now, we'll, Ms. Carretero, if you'd like to come up and talk to us about 117 Dunleith Avenue. Okay. If you'll go to the podium and give your name and address, please, for the record.
Es 117 N Dunleith Avenue.
Okay.
My name is Maria Rita Carretero.
Very good. Thank you. This, according to this, there's more than 50% of the present value of the dwelling that would be required for to repair. Can you tell us what it is that you're asking?
Que dice que como esto de lo que es 50% de restauración y que quieren que le digan a ellos qué es lo que quieren hacer.
Ok, ya empecé con las reparaciones y aquí están las fotos.
She said that she wants to repair her property, and she already got pictures that she's starting already on repairing.
Okay. And what you're asking is
She needs time.
more time?
Yeah.
Okay. What sort of time did you think you would need?
¿Cuánto tiempo?
6 meses.
6 months? How many months do you guys give for 6?
Okay, the standard is 3 months.
3 months? 6?
So you need 6 months?
Yes.
How does that sit with the committee? It's a cute house.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
What has been done so far? What repairs have been made?
¿Qué reparaciones han sido?
Las
The-
paredes,
The walls that it was very damaged, she already got it from the outside.
¿me las puedes enseñar?
Do you want to look at the
La
pictures?
fundación.
Sure.
You can put it on the,
Foundation, she already got it that repaired.
oh, okay, uh-huh.
Slide it to the middle, Ms. Stinson. Yeah, try to put them in the middle individually so we can see them. Thank you. Yeah.
Work on the foundation and the side. None of this work has been confirmed by an inspector. They've not been called out to reinspect.
Thank you.
Okay.
Foundation and the door. And the others are basically pictures of the door, the same door,
Okay.
and foundation, more foundation work.
What is the pleasure of the committee? What?
It's in his work.
Yeah.
I'm one to two pieces. You said this has not been, the inspectors have not been out to identify this and see it for themselves. So the pictures we have, they're not the most up-to-date pictures,
They are pictures that she has provided, but
not these in terms of what we have in our agenda.
the picture that I placed, this first picture is the picture, the only picture that I have as of today. This was taken today, but I have no pictures of the actual repairs that were made.
Right, and so, two things on that. One, I'm because of, again, that area and neighborhood, I know several of people who live actually directly neighboring to this property. I think in terms of the extension on this, I think is just, but what I would ask in terms of that the order, it would be done with that 6 months done, but just not a 6 months without the order.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I think so. Anyone want to make that motion, please?
Can I ask a question? So you want the order to give her 6 months? You want
6 months to demolish or repair, yeah. Is someone going to make
I
that?
move for approval.
Okay.
Can I just ask a question? Would it make sense to have a provision to have an inspection done by staff
Well, and
within
certainly,
that time period?
They would have to.
yeah.
Okay. I mean, a progress report kind of.
If I could report to the committee, please. In prior cases where 6 months or longer have been granted, we have done that based on a certain percentage being done after a couple of months, and if they're successful at getting it completed to that point, then an additional 3 months. But we found it to be very helpful if we have that type of stipulation.
Thank you.
How do you tell a percentage?
I would suggest that of the repairs, that at least 50% of those repairs be completed within 3 months, and if the 50% are completed within 3 months, then they would have an additional 3 months to complete the remaining.
Okay, all right, sounds good. Okay, all right. We understand that. All right. Someone put that in the form of a motion unless,
Since I didn't get a second on my motion, Madam Chair, I'll rescind the,
yeah.
So Jim Mullins is the one that is gonna be inspecting that house?
Yes.
Okay.
Pardon?
I made it. Would Mike make an amendment to the motion that the improvements, repairs be done, 50% of them be done within the 3 months, and an extension be given for 3 months, 3 more months after it's inspected by our process of the city.
Okay. All right.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So that's understood? You make progress and then get to the extra 3 months? Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's a very pretty house, very pretty. Okay.
In terms of the information that's on, is that on in Spanish? In terms of how we're sending information to them?
That's a question for Mr. Brooks.
Will our correspondence being sent back be in Spanish?
Yes, it can be.
Okay.
Very good. Okay. Now, okay, the next one, Mr. Cruz. Yes, if you'd like to come up and give your name and address, please. Barbara Jane.
Is the name and address?
Okay. If you'll give your name and address.
My name is Martin Doroteo, and the address is 421 Barbara Jane Avenue.
Okay, all right. Here again, the inspection shows that the estimated cost to repair is about the same as the market value. Can you tell us what your plans are for the house?
I'm just asking for more time because right now I have this list. I don't know if you can put it on the screen. Which is
The list of repairs,
uh-huh. I have this list of repairs.
they have that.
Oh,
Yeah, we have it.
and I'm just asking for more time to do this, to fix it.
All right. Any questions? Yeah.
Have you owned this property since 2011?
No.
Okay, because I guess what I'm saying here is that current complaint notice of hearing was issued back in 2011. Has there been a change in ownership since then?
He advised he purchased the property a year and a half ago.
Okay.
Year and a half ago.
So all of the,
I would have thought there would have been list pendants on there that title search would have picked up had it been done. I guess it wouldn't have to be done by an attorney, but.
If it's filed, it should have been filed.
Right. Okay.
If it was filed and if it did title search.
Right. Right.
C4.
pardon?
No, it's C4. Mr. Montgomery.
Yeah, for me, on this property, particularly in the fact that has there been any work at all done to the property?
Well, actually, we've been working in the inside, but nothing from the outside, and that's the problem. That's what the inspectors see, the outside. So, since I get the notice, I'm gonna start working on the outside. I'm gonna get focused on the outside.
And how much time do you believe it's going to take to do that?
Well, the list is kind of long, so I was thinking about maybe 8 months, if possible.
That is asking a bit much, I think. As you heard in the previous case, that's more than we usually allow. So it's up to the committee. What is your pleasure? Yeah.
Based upon what I see on the actual items of violations, That's
It's
not
not.
8 months worth of
No.
work to address those items that are listed there.
Yeah.
And I'm inclined on the other project based upon what was shown by the individuals of the work that had been done to move forward with giving an extension on this and understanding other properties in that neighborhood and the condition that they're in. I'm less inclined to have an extension
Yeah.
beyond the 90 days. And based upon what I see here, I'm not sure that it suggests additional time beyond that if the work is to be done.
All right, very good. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, and you said you were doing work on the inside?
Mhm.
But, and that's all good, but if you look at the list that we got for the violations, these are things that would be protecting your inside work. So, even looking at that picture, you might want to go ahead and get the screens and the windows and the roof done. So my advice to you as to the council member of the ward, you might want to go ahead and start working on the outside, but I am going to lend my support and vote to the council member of the ward, Madam Chair.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we're concerned about here is that the way the property looks, and it looks bad, affects the neighbor's property value around you. So there's an impact on them, and we would like to see, if you're going to go do work, we would like you to see you do the outside first,
Okay.
and then come back to us. I mean, you've got 90 days
Yeah.
before a bulldozer rolls.
Yeah.
And I would imagine that we would look favorably on an effort and some evidence that you have repaired some of the outside, and therefore taking some of that impact off your neighborhood,
Right.
your neighbors.
And in fact, all of these are outside.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we're agreed that the 90 days stand. If I could, someone will put that into a form of a motion.
Motion for approval on demolition order for 421 Barbara Jane Avenue, 90 days from council meeting on Monday.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Now,
Okay.
do you understand, though, that you've got some time to go do that and come back to us?
Okay.
All right?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Miss Dunlap, Mrs. Dunlap, 22nd Street. Okay, here we go.
This is 22nd.
Which item is it? Which item?
G.
C2G.
Miss Dunlap, if you'll give us your name and address for the record.
My name is Carnella Dunlap, 1538 East 22nd Street.
Thank you. And according to this is well over more than 50% of the value of the dwelling to repair, the estimated cost to repair. What is your position on that?
My position is, I went through, got in touch with Carolyn Ebert of, what you call it, Habitat for Humanity, Habitat to restore the house. And she's supposed to be working on me to try to restore the house. My house caught on fire. It was wiring in the wall. And at the time, I supposedly had insurance. My grandmother left me the house. The insurance, when I was a minor, it was left in my aunt's name until I took it over. Well, since the insurance was so long, I was just giving her the money to pay my insurance. Well, I didn't know. She cut the insurance off. And that house would have been paid for 4 times over, probably more than that. I was born and raised in that house. And so I tried, when the house caught on fire, I didn't know what to do. I came down here to the city and they was talking to me about it. They just said, board it up and keep on checking on the house and do what you got to do to it. And I was like, okay, I was in compliance. When stuff was in the yard, I made sure every week I came and cleaned up everything. I keep a check on the house. I didn't know about this part of the process. But I stay on 25th Street, and I ride by the house every day. I have anxiety about it. Only house I knew, I'd never been homeless before in my life, and I was homeless then. So what I'm saying is, I just need at least so I can get back in contact with Miss Carol about humanities and see what she's gonna do. It's just been a lot.
So you have spoken to somebody at Habitat.
Yes,
Can you tell me
Carol.
an outline of what they thought could be done?
Well, she working on a plan for me now.
Okay,
She is working on a plan with me now. I was trying to get her on the phone before I came, but I couldn't get her on the phone.
right. And then what is your plan once the property is restored?
I want to move back in my house.
You can
I'm
live in
paying rent at a house that I don't even.
Right, so your plan is to live in it?
Yes.
Okay.
You know, just like the other two cases, Ms. Dunlop, you know, the thing about it is what we do is based on the community and the city ordinances and that thing. And we tried to work with individuals and property owners within our ability to do that. This house, from what we're seeing here, has been like this since the unfortunate accident, I guess, 2012?
No, 2013. It was 2013.
But there were issues back to 2012. Am I right, City Attorney?
No, because
Based upon the summary of the case provided, it looks like there was a complaint notice of hearing issued in November of 2012.
November 2012.
November of 2012.
And then it became eligible for demolition June of 29th of 2013. And it's now 2016.
But see, didn't nobody. When I got this, I have been going down there to the city because you know how they send out a paper saying that your yard is not right and this, or you need to be in compliance.
Notice, yeah.
Yeah. So I've been going down there because somebody from a gas station had 6 barrels in my yard full with something that I didn't know what it was. I called the police, I called the city because they didn't want us to move it because they had flames on the barrels or whatever. So I've been going down there talking to people at the city about my house. But I haven't been told about like your rulings, this is my first time ever. You know, I pay my taxes on my house. I've been there all my life until it caught on fire. I did not know about this side of it. Until Friday, this right here was on my door. Tuesday, I called David Belloff and asked him about it. He said, well, you have a meeting. And I was like, but I just got this over the weekend. He said, well, Ms. Dunlap, he said, they didn't send it to your address. And I was like, well, the city got my address downtown because I'm at 1214 East 25th Street. They said, no, they still got your P.O. box number. I say, but every time you send me a thing saying the yard or something need to be done, you send it to 1214 East 25th.
And Ms. Dunlop, you know, we feel your pain, trust me. Right now, as the chairwoman would tell you, the house is slated for, basically for demolition. And that the way this goes, just like with the other two cases you just heard, you have a timeline and the clock's ticking. Mm-hmm. And I appreciate the fact that you are in touch with Habitat, you know, to try to get some help or solution to the issue of the house to make it livable. I mean, it's brick, but I don't know whether our inspectors have been inside or not.
The foundation is good.
And I understand that, but again, I don't know how the chair and the other members of the committee are going to stand. I'm sure, again, 90 days, if you got some plan you working on, I would say go work the plan, because the clock is ticking, you know?
And just to add to that, I mean, the last thing we want to do is tear down it.
Right.
And especially in areas where affordable housing is in short supply already. So we don't want to tear this house down. But at some point, the negative impact of the condition of this house
Community.
outweighs our hope that it's going to somehow be saved. So the onus is on you to go get this deal done, talk to Habitat, and then I would ask that the folks from Habitat communicate with us about what the reality is of this taking place. But you've got 90 days to do that.
Have our inspectors seen the inside?
Pardon?
Have our inspectors been inside?
No.
I don't know, but what I was going to suggest, if the order to demolish is adopted, we can work with the property owner and coordinate whatever conversations she's had with Habitat for Humanity to see what they can do, and we can also work with her to see if she would qualify for any of the programs that we provide from the city, to see what other options may be available for her within that 90-day period, and we can report that back to you via email and let you know whether or not we're able to do something or the order would proceed as directed.
Well, then let's, shall we hold this then until we know, or go ahead and adopt it?
I think we approve the demolition.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Move for approval of C2G demolition in 90 days.
Second.
Let me ask that as a part of the efforts, let's please see about getting a look at the inside. See, is this a realistically savable structure?
Yes.
Or is the fire damage? I understand that you want it to be, and I hope it is. But let's take a look, because sometimes the fire damage inside can be so extensive that professionals will get inside and look at it and say, "Ma'am, really, this is a loss." But let's take a look, please.
And that can be part of our review, and if it's such that it's not practical to save the property, we'll advise her on that and still suggest some other avenues that may be available for her.
All right.
Thanks.
Good.
I don't think we
second?
voted.
We
Did
did
you
the
get a
second.
second?
Yeah.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All
Good
right.
luck.
Yes, good luck, Ms. Dunlap, and I think the staff will be of help to you. Okay, last one. Mr. Dowd signed up to speak. If you'll come up and give your name and address. And this is,
On the May property, be Section H on your agenda, ma'am. 2H?
okay, Robinwood Lane.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, H. Okay. Yes, sir.
Hi, good afternoon, Madam Chairman, fellow commissioners. My name is A.J. Dowd, and I am the owner of the property right next door at 5707 Robinwood Lane.
What's your address?
5707, right next door. I just want to say thank you all for what you're doing. I served 10 years as the vice chairman of the Zoning and Planning Board of Pilot Mountain, and just recently got done being the governor's appointee with the Lottery Commission. So I thank you for your service. I'm just here to stand today to see if, and the owner of the property will probably be talking to you with her attorney in a second. My attorney was not unable to get here, Gary Mills. He's been talking to staff. Myself and Mrs. Hudson have just recently entered in negotiations for possibly buying the property. As of this moment, I have to report to the board that there is no contract, nothing in writing. We're just at the preliminary stages, but a short continuance of 30 days or 60 to your next day meeting might possibly get us to an agreement with her and help get the property cleared. So I just wanted to go ahead and put that on record. I also want to put on record, Madam Chairman, that we have no intention of rehabbing or saving the building. I think it's in our opinion that it is unsavable, so we are looking at it strictly as real estate value or possibly helping the town eliminate the burden of the demolition off of it. So that'll be our position, but again, I just want to thank you for your services and let me put that on the record.
Okay, thank you. I think in this case, it looks like it will resolve itself, but let's go ahead and, we can always rescind the demolition order, but yes.
I am the owner of the property, and it looks terrible, but it's a mess. And how it got in this mess was, I was taking care of my mother for several years. And my husband at the time looked after this. This was a building that was 5 apartments. And I had to take care of my mother full time. I said I wasn't going to do this. And he took care of it. Well, he died in 2014. I didn't know the building was damaged. He never told me. I discovered this shortly after his death. I was left in a mess. He left me 2 years behind on the taxes. So I got those caught up. I'm almost paid up for this past year. I've almost got that paid. The building's not worth the time or the money to repair. It's too far gone. But Mr. Dabb and I think can come to an understanding on an agreement. He has the property right behind that. I sold that to him. And I would just like to ask you to give us some time for us to finish our business together. And then when he purchases the property, he will take care of the demolition himself.
Okay. I think, any questions? No.
I think this is going to resolve, the building's coming down one way or the other.
Yeah.
It's not repairable. It would cost way more than it's worth to repair it. There's people that's been in it, vagrants have been in it and left trash, and we've had to clean it out, board up windows and doors, and they've done damage. Also, the damage is done to the roof. It's not repairable at all. Yeah. In my opinion, I wouldn't spend the money to repair it.
Madam Chair, maybe you go ahead with your demolition order.
Yeah.
And if we do reach an agreement, we can report back to the board that we have.
Absolutely.
If we're at an impasse with the purchase of the property, at least you've done your responsibility and the city can move forward with it.
Thank you, yes. I think that's where we're going, yeah. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I move for the approval of the demolition order for C2H, 5705 Robin Wood Lane.
Yep.
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
That gives you 90 days. Hopefully, that'll be plenty of time
I
for
hope
you and
so.
Mr. Dow to
Yes.
get your business sorted
ma'am.
out. Okay.
Okay, thank you so much.
I hate to be rude, Madam Chair. One last question. My lawyer had spoken to many members of staff that are here, and thank you, whoever did, but he said he kept getting the round robin. Is there a key person that you recommend on this that we can go to, or maybe your staff attorney? I don't know if his name.
I'm fine, or Stephanie.
Stephanie would be the one, I think, to...
Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Good luck.
Whew. Okay. I think we've done all of C2, then there's just C3. Let's...
Take a vote on that last item, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yes.
There's no one here for Ansonia Street? No. Okay, good.
Approve. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, good. Wow. Okay, we're done with that.
Yeah, not quite.
Oh, man. Okay, we'll move on to the general agenda. Okay. If we can start with G1.
Item G1, consideration of additional financing for the development of single-family housing. A, resolution authorizing additional financing for development in the Ridgewood Place subdivision to SG Atkins Community Development Corporation. B, ordinance amending the project budget ordinance for the city of Winston-Salem, North Carolina for the fiscal year 2015-2016.
Yeah. I think, was everyone here when we talked about this in finance?
I've reviewed it. I have no questions.
Have no questions, okay.
Madam Chair, I move for approval of G1.
Okay.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Done. Okay, G2, please.
Item G2, resolution authorizing up to $236,000 in additional permanent financing for the development of 64 units of rental housing for families to be known as Rockwood at Oliver's Crossing Apartments.
Okay, thank you. Again, I think everybody heard this or
This one
has
was-
reviewed it.
Madam Chair, this one was held in committee, I believe.
Held in committee, yeah.
Finance.
So I guess we should do the same to keep things on a level field. So, Ms. Scogging, it'll be held in committee, so we'll see you next month. Okay, all right, very good. Okay, here we go. Number 3, G3.
Item G3, ordinance revising Chapter B of the Unified Development Ordinance to amend regulations for accessory dwellings, UDO 267.
Okay. Mr. Norby.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. As you well know, this has quite a bit of history to it, so what I'm going to do is kind of recount some of that to kind of get everybody back on the same page, and then we'll go through the details of how the ordinance developed during its discussion and consideration of the planning board that brings it to you today. Accessory dwellings are structures that may be attached or detached from the principal residential structure or the lot. They have existed in the UDO since its adoption in 1994 and in prior city ordinances since the 1930s. Accessory dwellings can be found in older neighborhoods in the central city, as well as in more outlying and rural areas of the city and the county. The staff previously discussed with this committee in August of last year the need to amend accessory unit regulations. The UDO presently limits the occupancy of accessory units to relatives, adopted persons, dependents of or servants of the property owners, individuals over 55, and handicapped persons are also allowed to occupy attached accessory dwellings. Based on recent North Carolina case law, the Attorney's Office has identified concerns regarding the enforceability of the current ordinance. And that case law suggests that municipalities do not have the authority to limit the use of land based on the identity of the users or the owners of the property. The city attorney advises that an amendment is necessary to protect our ordinances from a legal challenge.
May I interrupt you just for clarification, if possible? Is it Wilmington case or whatever? Of course, I don't know it as well as you do, but it seemed to me, it seemed to me that had to do with the main dwelling being occupied by renters, and that they could then rent out the accessory dwelling. Am I correct on that?
Good afternoon.
Yes.
The City of Wilmington case, their ordinance at the time required that the owner live in either the primary or accessory dwelling. And so the court struck that down and said that municipalities are not allowed to regulate the use of the property based on the identity of the user, in that instance, that the owner reside in one of the two units. Similarly, our ordinance contains a provision of that nature as well, and that's why we've recommended an amendment.
All right. Okay. So it's your opinion that no matter who lives in the main house, the accessory dwelling would if it were limited to family, whatever, that could be challenged legally. Yes.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's further clarification. Paul, I'm sorry.
So during our analysis of what our options were, we looked at the larger municipalities in the state, and we found that all but 4 of the state's largest municipalities allow accessory dwellings in single-family neighborhoods. So this is not a rare circumstance. It's a common practice to allow accessory dwellings in single-family neighborhoods. The 4, by the way, are Raleigh, Chapel Hill, Jacksonville, and Monroe. Legacy 2030, your adopted comprehensive plan, also highlighted the benefits of accessory dwellings, which include increased affordable housing options, diverse housing options for a growing population, options for aging in place for the elderly or the sick, and additional income generation for the property owner. After we met with the committee last year, we held 2 public input meetings in September to discuss proposed ordinance changes and to seek citizen feedback. A number of neighborhood residents and also tiny home advocates attended and voiced either concern or interest related to subjects such as setbacks of accessory units, size limitations, design issues, and the impact of the ordinance on the tiny house movement. And of course, that's been kind of a new thing over the last couple of years. A number of people have been very interested in that. So folks who are interested in that were inquiring as to whether tiny houses are going to be allowed or outlawed in our community. So with this, I'd like Kirk Erickson to explain to you how the specific provisions of the ordinance were put into the proposal during the several months that followed that. During the planning board discussion, several different iterations of review by them and the public.
Good afternoon, committee members.
Good afternoon.
As Paul was mentioning, this went through several months of different iterations with the planning board, and I'm just going to try and unpack those briefly for you. The planning board began its discussions on the possible ordinance revision specifics in October of 2015. At that time, staff suggested the following provisions. The first would be to remove the kinship provisions that the attorney's office recommended that we steer clear of in the future. The second is parking for the unit must be provided and served by the same driveway as the principal dwelling, unless that accessory unit is on a corner lot or alley. This was done to make any parking or driveway access less impactful on the character of the residential street in the neighborhood. Third, detached units must be behind the front facade of the main dwelling. This is something that we generally see in other ordinances. It's something that keeps the residential single-family character of these neighborhoods by having the homes be the first thing you see, not some smaller structure protruding into the front yard space. We also recommended that accessory units only be permitted in single-family residential uses. So in other words, it's not a way to bump up the density of a multifamily use. It's just a way, if you have a single-family home, to have a smaller accessory residential use. We also proposed raising the current height limit for these units to 24 feet from 17 feet that's in the current code. The reason we did this is in talking to our chief building official and others, we learned that modern construction techniques generally have taller pitches for roofs and things of that nature. So if you wanted to have a 2-story, such as a situation where you might have a 2-car detached garage with a little unit above it, you really needed to go up to 12 foot per floor, which brings you to 24 feet. Also, we proposed a 1,000 square foot size limit for accessory units. Size limits are common in other ordinances in some of the municipalities that Paul was talking about, and 1,000 square foot seemed appropriate and clearly subservient to most single-family residential uses. We also had several setbacks proposed as part of this ordinance. For residential districts, we propose that the minimum rear setbacks be equal to 50% of the required rear setback of a principal structure in that district. For example, in a residential district like RS9, which is what most of Winston-Salem is, you have 9,000 square foot, basically quarter-acre zoning lots. That setback would be 25 feet for the rear setback in RS9. In that case, the accessory would have a 12.5-foot rear setback, which is significantly more than the 3-foot setback required by the current ordinance. Also for residential districts, we proposed a side setback the same as those of the principal structure, which would be 7 feet on one side, but no less than a total of 20 feet when you add the two sides together. Again, the current ordinance only requires a 3-foot setback, so that's also more restrictive than the current ordinance. For non-residential districts where you may have single-family residential uses, we proposed a similar 12.5-foot rear setback and the same 7-foot on one side rear setback, total of 20 feet for the combination of both, 7 feet on one side setback, total of 20 feet for the combination of the two side setbacks.
Okay, let me make sure I understand that. That means if it's 7 feet, if my accessory dwelling is 7 feet from my line, and there's another 7 feet or whatever on the neighbor's side, that's what you're calling the combined setback?
No, the combined would be, if, let's say you're looking at the front of your house, if you look to one side of the home, you may be allowed to have 7 feet, but if you do 7 feet on that side, you'd have to do 13 feet, for example, on the right side of your home to make the total combined 20 feet for both of your side setbacks.
Okay.
You could do it a different way. For example, you could have 10 feet on one side and 10 feet on the other, but our current code does this with the standard single-family principal residence in the district, is to give you that extra flexibility to go as low as 7 feet on one side.
Okay, so this does not say anything about the accessory dwelling having to be concealed or whatever, match the setbacks of the main dwelling?
It would not. Well, it wouldn't have to match the dwelling itself. For example, the dwelling may have a setback per ordinance of at least 7 feet, but the dwelling may in actuality be 20 feet.
Correct.
There's nothing in this ordinance that would make those setbacks match. In other words, you could have a 7-foot side setback for an accessory unit, and you could have a 30-foot or a 50-foot side setback, for example. It just depends, but the minimum ordinance requirements match. It's up to each individual builder or homeowner to choose their individual setback for the principal building and the accessory building as long as they meet those minimums.
Okay, thank you. That helps.
Okay, attached accessory dwellings would still be permitted by right with the issuance of a zoning permit from staff. Those are the things that you probably don't even know are around in the community, because they would basically be an in-law suite in a basement or just a different wing on a house with a separate entrance. Those things don't really have much of an impact on the neighborhood, so we just issue a building permit from those at the staff level. And the uses that are more impactful, the detached units, would still require a special use permit from the Board of Adjustment. That would still require notification of adjacent property owners, a sign posting, and a public hearing where the 4 findings of fact would be met.
You guys going to be busy.
So after October, the planning board and staff had several meetings over a period of 3 months. There were also some email exchanges, and questions were answered, which you all got in your packets, the answers to those questions. But what came out of that was a planning board public hearing was ultimately held in February. And additional requirements beyond those last 2 slides that I talked about were put into the ordinance in the February version. The first of those would be 1 parking space being required per accessory unit bedroom. So we went from a situation where in October we were just requiring that parking be taken care of to a situation where now each bedroom is required its own parking space to make sure that parking is accommodated very clearly. Second, detached units must be on lots at least 9,000 square feet in size. That goes back to the point I was making earlier that most standard single-family lots in Winston-Salem are about a quarter acre, 9,000 square feet nominally in size. We and the board didn't really want to cram in too much on lots smaller than that size, so that's where this requirement came from. We also added the requirement that detached units are only allowed on lots where the principal residence occupies no more than 30% of the total lot area. That also goes to the point about making sure there's still some open space on a lot, that it's not just wall-to-wall buildings. The next point the board added was that a maximum square footage limit could be increased to 1,500 square feet in Growth Management Area 3. That's the suburban area where the Winston-Salem limits butt up to the smaller towns or unincorporated Forsyth County. A lot of that area was recently annexed into Winston-Salem about 10 years ago, and some of the lotting patterns are much larger there than in the rest of the city. And this provision would only be available in that area on lots at least an acre in size, and that's to accommodate some of the more rural suburban development patterns that you see in those areas. Again, the 1,000 square foot limit would be retained that we talked about for accessory detached units in growth management areas 1 and 2, the more urban neighborhoods, basically inside of Silas Creek Parkway and the downtown area. Additionally, the board proposed that there be no square footage limit in growth management areas 4 and 5. Those are the rural areas generally outside of the Winston-Salem city limits, except that an accessory unit must be smaller than the principal residence on that lot. Again, we're developing this ordinance both from a city and county perspective, and a lot of what we see in the county for accessory dwellings is manufactured homes where a family member wants to provide some housing for their children or relative, etc., and we wanted to make sure that would still be accommodated. Also, the board would propose that detached units must be set back at least 20 feet from the principal residence on the lot. So this would be in addition to the setbacks from the property line that we talked about. This would make sure that there's adequate separation between the actual units on the lot. Finally, in February, the board decided that no more than 2 adults should be allowed to live in an accessory unit. There were a lot of discussions at the board level about being concerned that we might be putting too many people on a lot, we might be taxing the neighborhood in terms of just accommodating too many people in a single-family zoning district. So with the staff, we decided that basically 2 adults would be a reasonable amount of folks to live in one of these accessory units. After the public hearing in February, the staff and the planning board went into work session and talked about several comments that were heard at the February public hearing. At that time, 3 additional requirements were proposed to layer on top of the 2 sets of requirements that I just previously talked about. The first of those is all parking for accessory units must exist in the form of off-street parking. So we started out with a requirement for parking, then we refined that to say that you had to have parking for each bedroom, and ultimately the board ended up saying all that parking had to be accommodated on-site to make sure that we're not adding to additional challenges in on-street parking in some of these neighborhoods. Second, the board recommended that variances may not be granted for lots which are less than that 9,000 square foot size limit, basically not allowing any of those smaller lots, even through the variance process, to have a detached accessory unit. And finally, the board recommended that variances for existing structures that don't meet the dimensional or size requirements of the ordinance may only be granted for structures that existed prior to the adoption of these regulations. In other words, someone couldn't basically have a self-imposed hardship where they try and make something that doesn't meet these ordinance requirements and then ask for forgiveness from the Board of Adjustment. So this resulting proposed ordinance, after all 3 of these rounds of changes, is more restrictive than all of the other larger municipalities in North Carolina, with the exception of the 4 cities that Paul mentioned that totally prohibit accessory dwellings. After substantial discussions and desires for further restrictions, some of the planning board members expressed some concerns, and the following motions were made and voted on at the March 10th planning board meeting. A first motion to approve the ordinance as presented by the staff was made and denied unanimously, with some planning board members stating that the ordinance was not strict enough, and others were concerned that we'd become too strict after all the rounds of ordinance modifications. A second motion was made to completely remove accessory dwelling provisions from the ordinance, and that failed on a 2-6 vote. A third motion to simply remove the occupancy provisions that the city attorney saw as questionably legal was passed on a 6-2 vote. And all three ordinance versions have been forwarded to council for your consideration.
And if I could just add one thing, we have not scheduled this or advertised it for a public hearing yet because our working assumption is the committee is probably going to want to discuss this, and particularly since you have three versions here, you probably want to sort through that before you decide that the council's ready for a public hearing.
All right, very good.
I'll be glad to answer any questions at this time if you have any.
Okay. Who wants to go first? Okay, I thought so.
For my council members and even the planning board, I have to say, I did mention when this was mentioned before, the world is changing around us. And we already see what happens when we don't change with the world. I think for me, as everyone knows, I am a tiny house home proponent. I think it's the best thing since sliced bread. I think that as the boomers become older and even younger people, you paying for a $150,000 to $250,000 house when you could sell that house to somebody that really wants all that house, and you could pay off that if you have any left, and you could buy or build a tiny house anywhere from $25,000 to up to $100,000 if that's what you want. But the average price is around $25,000 to $35,000. Again, I mentioned boomers are getting older. We're getting sick, and we need people to be around us now. I think, for me, I think it's a good point. I think you got your staff planning. You've done a tremendous job of bringing this back and forth to us and keeping us informed. I do think that some of the, neighborhoods in the city who are used to seeing their neighborhoods one way, and I understand that quality of life mindset where they're restricted. They don't want accessory buildings and tiny homes behind their homes with children, seniors, whatever. They just want it to be what it is. Well, this deal, like I told somebody else, may have to lend itself to like my thing with the no parking on the lawn. This may go as a deal where as communities have to somehow get together and get a petition and sign some names as to who wants it. Because in the inner urban core of the city, we need affordable housing. So again, I commend you on helping to frame affordable housing, accessible housing for seniors and physically and mentally challenged relatives and others, and helping to sustain economic development, quality of life. I applaud you. And it's very interesting the way the planning board went. You know, how they voted this time with it, and they voted against it, some of them, and it's kind of been back and forth. But again, I think it's a great plan. I think we're in step with all the other cities that have already undertaken this.
Thank
you. First, let me just say, I'm deeply divided on this. I'm very much conflicted. I do want to say that I own some rental property, but none of my properties have accessory dwellings, so I don't really have a dog in a fight. But I grew up at a house that probably was on a 5,000 square foot lot that had a garage apartment on it. My parents rented out. My first house was a duplex downtown on First Street that we rented out the upstairs, and it allowed us to own a home at the age of 27 when otherwise I would not have been able to. The quality of life issues that are being raised about the intrusiveness of accessory dwellings, I tend to think is a little bit overblown. Yet I see the opposite side of the coin where in Old Salem or Washington Park or West End that people feel very threatened by it. So it's a very tricky subject to me. I would like to ask, the 9,000 square foot lot size to me seems somewhat arbitrary, and it does seem that it would cut out quite a few of the neighborhoods that would probably be benefited most by this, some of the inner city neighborhoods. I know a lot of the West Salem properties are 7,000 square foot or below 9,000 square foot. I know some of the Holly Avenue properties are below 9,000. Holly Avenue tends to have quite a few accessory dwellings in it. So I don't know that, to me, that 9,000 square foot has any magic to it. I don't want to see us get into a situation where we are going to sort of re-energize and re-allow rooming houses in neighborhoods that have fought very hard to get rid of them, so I think we need to be very conscious of that. I'm curious, during the public discussions, were there any advocates or people in favor of increased accessory dwelling access that were not tiny house advocates? Did we have people come step up in favor of looser regulations?
Councilmember McIntosh, I can't recall specifically anyone not affiliated with the tiny house movement advocating for looser regulations. But with regard to your first question regarding establishing the 9,000 square foot limit, I've put up a map that I believe we included in your packets on the projection screen here. The blue lots are those lots that, first of all, this is just a snapshot of residential zoning only. That's why there's a lot of vacant holes as you approach downtown and areas like that. But the blue lots are those urban and center city lots that are over 9,000 square feet. The yellow lots are the lots that would not be allowed to have an accessory detached structure under this ordinance. The way we came up with that number is, again, in our city zoning ordinance, RS9 or 9,000 square foot lots is kind of the standard suburban or urban style lot that you see in most areas for single family residential. So we felt that as a way to filter out some of the potentially inappropriate uses of this ordinance in a simple way, that we could use that as a filter to limit any lots that are sub 9,000 square feet from having the option of having detached accessory units. It was a simple number that tied to the existing zoning ordinance.
And I'll just add into what Kirk just said, not necessarily about this map here, but we did receive an email from someone, and I believe that email is in your packet, who felt like we were getting too restrictive in what we were talking about and was advocating for the ability to have accessory dwellings more than what she perceived that we were allowing for.
Right. But I mean, if you look at the colors on the map, it seems to me that the orange color, which would not allow accessory dwelling units, are pretty precisely where they would be most requested, most used.
Yes, but also being able to zoom in, which I know you can't do right there, but just about all the central city neighborhoods have some blue areas within them. So it still allows for the possibility, even though many and in some cases most of the lots would not be eligible for it. So that was, again, it's a matter of just trying to find the right balance there. And I guess in our case, we thought the 9,000 made some sense since it was tied to a zoning district.
Yeah. One of the things that might be a part of this discussion about the square footage is the fact, I think you and I sort of talked about the fact that I can see dollar signs in people's eyes thinking, oh, I'm going to put an accessory dwelling in my backyard. I'm going to get some money out of this. Tell me what a 1,000 square foot house would cost.
Well, so let me do the math here. If you're going to build, say, a garage apartment, you're going to do a 500 square foot, small 2-bedroom, 1-bath. At $80 a square foot construction cost, you're talking about a $40,000
$40,000
dwelling.
Yes,
Okay.
and then your taxes are going to go up.
Right. So.
And your insurance is going to go up. And all of those things.
Right. So on that 40,000 square foot, if you took out a 20-year mortgage at 4%, your principal and interest, your taxes and insurance would add up to about a $4,000 a year expense. And if you charge $500 a month for it, which I think is probably about accurate, that's $6,000 in income. But from that, you subtract 30% for maintenance and reserves, which is the standard calculation, and you've got $4,200. It's not a slam dunk financial move forward. I don't believe the market is going to respond and just go out and build a lot of these. The other factor is that a lot of buyers don't want to buy a house that's got an accessory dwelling behind it. So it'll be the owner's calculation about whether they want to risk potentially devaluing their property by putting one on. Others will say it makes sense, but it's not. I just don't think there's going to be a rush to do this. So the finances are interesting.
Are you through with your question?
Yes.
I interrupted. Mr. Best.
I am far from an expert in real estate.
Well, we've got
Pretty close.
Yeah, I'm close to an expert in real estate. But I get the impression that we've got here a situation where the reality on the ground is not likely to match the theory. The benefits of accessory dwellings that have been cited have primarily been ones like aging in place, caring for elderly family members, precisely the kind of thing that is promoted by the code provision that we have that we're told we cannot enforce. I am concerned that the on-the-ground effect of encouraging or being more permissive about construction of new accessory dwellings will actually, in fact, have the effect in neighborhoods that are, on the edge. They're in pretty good condition. They've got a pretty good mix of owner-occupant and rental, but they're under pressure on an ongoing basis. Will tip over some of the edge areas toward an increased density and, in effect, a double rental. And the impact in reality will not match the theoretical benefits that we could see. I am adamantly opposed to simply removing the restriction and throwing it open. I am leery of simply changing the numbers and making it more possible to add additional accessory dwellings, even with the thoughtful list of restrictions that have been suggested. I have gotten, you can see from the map that which neighborhoods in each of our wards are potentially affected by the provisions here, the 1 and 2 GMAs. And the main one in my ward is the Ardmore neighborhood. It's the largest neighborhood I represent. It's one of those that I think is potentially most theoretically affected by the changes. And while I am certain that I have not heard every opinion in that area, the ones that I've heard have been strongly negative because of the concerns that I was just reflecting from it. I'm not against continuing to look at the details of what could be changed to precisely permit new accessory dwellings without encouraging them, but I don't think my constituents are going to support my going any further than that.
Thank you. Councilmember Montgomery.
A couple questions. On the one of the provisions that was discussed within the planning board's discussions and the occupancy statement in terms of the 2 adults restriction on that, in what was do you recall the entire basis of conversation on that 2 adult restriction?
The discussion centered around some board members were concerned that this might be a way to load up the density, the number of persons living on a single-family lot. For example, if you had a family of 2 adults and 3 kids, 5 people living in the main house, and then you had another family of 2 adults and 2 kids, or 2 adults and 1 kid living in the accessory house, you may have between 5 and 10 people on a single-family lot. So as a way to reach a compromise and allow these accessory units in single-family neighborhoods, the board felt that allowing only 2 people would be reflective of the smaller size of these units and basically not a means for cramming in, if you will, a large number of people in a smaller accessory structure.
I think another thing is that currently the definition of family includes up to 4 unrelated adults, and I think there was some fear that perhaps somebody that wanted to set up an accessory unit for college students would have 4 unrelated adults living in an accessory dwelling there. So the capping that adults at 2, they felt was a way to kind of keep that reined in a little bit. So.
Yeah, and I get the conversation around not wanting to see this dramatic expanse of density in some of the areas and how you control that. My only challenge is when you put that restriction there, that because in single-family property, you may have some properties that have 5 to 10 people living in the property in itself without having a discussion about the accessory dwelling question. And so to add that on this is just a question that I have, just for me personally, kind of batting that back. And I don't think college students aren't a bad word, so I don't. It's not a bad word. I was a college student when I got here, so you know, it was a few years ago, but still I was a college student. So, and when we look at even the detached question and the lot size, that's a question for me too. Again, when I look at if we're going to do anything and we're going to change some of the parameters around it. And I'd look particularly at some of the urban core areas that I represent as a council member. I am challenged with the fact of what I see nationally in a trend on the re-urbanization in terms of how we're coming back into urban cores of cities and the fact of what that does for increasing the actual costs of housing in those areas. And so if we're only allowing, and when we see on the map, we see accessory dwellings on the outsides of the city rather than within the center part of the city, I think that goes counter to being able to open up opportunity for some type of concept of affordability in the central portions of the city. And for me, that will be a thought in my mind in looking at this of how can this be a potential tool to have some type of additional affordability within the urban core of the city, and not necessarily pushing that opportunity out to the suburban areas with the larger lot sizes. And even to the extent the question then comes with the basement units and being able to get just a zoning permit from staff, does that also require the same sense of the lot size? Is there a restriction when it's an actual attached unit? Is there any restriction on lot size?
Its only restriction would be the lot size of the zoning district it's in. But again, most of those lots are, let me back that up a minute. If the building is existing before the UDO was put into place in 1994, and let's say it's RS9, which requires a 9,000 square foot lot, and the actual lot is 8,000 square feet, it would be a legally non-conforming lot. So in that case, it wouldn't be required to meet that 9,000 square foot limit. But let's say you're building a new house in the RS9 zoning district that requires 9,000 square feet. In that case, it would be the same 9,000 square foot minimum lot size as what we're proposing for accessory uses.
And I want to kind of more so drill on the attached component for me outside of the detached piece, and kind of thinking of when you think of basement apartments, or you think of your brownstones with a lower level unit that you can access outside of going into the property upstairs. With that type of unit specifically, would there be a restriction? Would we be looking at restriction on lot sizes on that, something of that nature?
Not beyond the scenario that I just mentioned, that it would have to meet the minimum zoning district standards.
And so as long as it met it met the standard of its current zoning, it would be permissible.
Correct.
Okay. And then my final question is on the detached ones. When we think about the detached structures and the accessibility components, when you think about maybe new structures or those things, you're thinking over garages or anything like that. My question then becomes, and just from a safety standpoint, and how with the permitting process in other cities, is when they're doing the construction of those things, is that just follows the normal permitting process on construction, or is there something different because of its intended use, or does it come on the backside?
Depending on if it's a new structure or whether you're rehabbing an older structure, it would depend on if you're under the current version of the state building code or whether you're under the rehab code. But anything that's being built would have to go through the standard building permitting processes, any standard single-family structure to go through our inspections division permitting process, the full review and everything like any other construction.
Okay.
Let me get in a couple of questions before we're going to have to turn this over to Public Works. One of the things I thought about when you were talking about parking spaces for each bedroom, well, if you have only one bedroom but 2 people staying in it, you could have 2 cars, and so requiring parking for the cars, forget about the people, the number of cars in an accessory dwelling might be something that we could think about adding to this, because from what I've heard across the country, the most problematic thing about accessory dwellings has been parking. That it causes the most trouble in neighborhoods. So, and certainly, you know, if you stack cars in a driveway, are you going to go knock on your landlord's door telling him to move his car because you need to get out or something like that? I think the parking question needs another look. Just so we're clear on that. Certainly some of the orange areas, gold areas, parking on the street or on the sidewalk or on the lawn is going to be a problem. There's already density of parking in these inner city neighborhoods. So I think the parking is something that we need to take a look at. Another question, you mentioned double rental. We'll go back to that.
That may have been my phrase. I was suggesting, if I may, that with the inability to restrict accessory uses to principal residents that are owner occupied, what we will end up with, you know, on an increasingly frequent basis is a double rental situation,
which is the Wilmington situation.
And in fact, what we'll have for large parts of neighborhoods is an RS 4.5 as opposed to an RS 9. Now that's a policy choice. We can make that, but I think if we continue to call it an RS 9, we've got a truth in advertising problem.
Okay. The permitting by the ZBA, is there a way to make sure, I know you have something in the proposed ordinance about absolutely no, the ZBA can't say, oh, it's okay, you're almost 9,000 square feet or whatever. So that can't happen. So, but what power does the ZBA have in granting that sort of,
wiggle room?
Yeah, wiggle room. Okay.
Basically, the ZBA has a very limited role in granting that. First of all, if you're in the situation where you're creating a self-imposed hardship, which is where you're building something from scratch, for example, and you know it's not going to meet the requirements of the ordinance, they wouldn't approve something like that, so that wouldn't be permissible. They have no authority to permit the sub 9,000 square foot lots from either using an existing structure or having a new structure. So again, really what we're talking about is the ZBA being a tool to help folks who might have an existing non-conforming apartment or something, then they just want to make it legal under the current ordinance. The other thing I want to point out with the ZBA is it's factually based. So if one of these units goes for a public hearing and they can successfully demonstrate the findings of fact, the board is obligated to approve that unit. But the findings of fact are fairly stiff in terms of demonstrating that the unit is in compliance with the comprehensive plan and other policies of the city's long-term planning policies, basically proving, and the onus is on the petitioner, to prove that it's not going to harm the values of the residences in the neighborhood, and making sure that it's not going to be detrimental to the health, safety, and welfare of the neighborhood. So if those can all be proved in the affirmative, and again, they have to prove all of those findings in the affirmative, that's the only way that something could move forward.
And I'll just add to that based on the testimony they hear at the public hearing, affected property owners, they could put in requirements that are more restrictive than these minimums that are in the ordinance. For example, if there was some testimony that suggested to them that a particular unit was going to greatly impact someone that was right next door to it, they might be able to, in their conditions, say this needs to be set back an additional amount beyond the minimum. That they can do those kinds of things.
They being?
The Board of Adjustment.
Okay.
So they have the leeway based on what is presented to them to put additional restrictions or conditions on their approval there, as long as they're based on the facts that are presented at the hearing.
But what about, okay, Dan, this is the last one. Okay, what about the fact that the courts held that the neighborhoods who would in fact be presenting hardships or whatever to the ZBA, the courts have found they have no standing?
Well, I think, again, the notice is given to the surrounding property owners, the property is posted, and that has to be a judgment each time whether that property owner that is, if they're a mile away and they're testifying, then there would be difficult to prove that they are directly impacted by this. But certainly the next door neighbors, if they're testifying, that would be certainly something that would be directly relevant to what the board has to consider.
And will the notification area be just the adjacent properties or our standard 500 feet?
Well, the standard, the 500 is for a rezoning. So the ordinance as it's written now for Board of Adjustment, special use permits or variances, it is just the surrounding property owners that get the mail notice, but there is a sign that's posted on the property as well.
Okay, all right. We're going to have to stop. Okay.
Can I ask one quick question? That is, I would ask if there's an opportunity to have a conversation with the Housing Authority. I would like to see, they've had a concept in reference to two-first in the sense of, building, principal property and then attaching to that or detached dwellings that would be able to help people in home ownership. That's the specific purpose, is to how do you help individuals afford becoming a homeowner, and that person who's in the principal dwelling has to become the landlord in effect for that other unit. And I just wonder in terms of, I know they've had drawings and things of those properties and even talk about, could you do infill building on that? I would just want to know with any of those designs, where that could actually be built. Where could that work? What kind of lots, what kind of infills, kind of things could that actually work in? Okay. It'd just be helpful just to kind of see.
What was the terminology?
Two-first. I don't know if that is the that's the term that Larry uses, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was, but the designs I saw were more like for a duplex where the owner lives in one and they're renting out the other.
Yeah, but I know they had a couple different kind of concepts they were looking at. Yeah.
I think we've got a ways to go on this, honestly.
Oh, yeah.
Because I don't feel like the neighborhoods are adequately protected, and yet I think that we're going to encourage sprawl. Unless we find a way to increase our density, then the only other option is to go out. And we haven't had much growth in population lately, but it's coming. We hope at some point, and I think at that point it'd be great to be able to accommodate them.
Well, may I suggest then that we keep this in committee, and you know, everybody do your homework and study on this. Read all three versions.
Ahead of time, and we can try to answer those before it comes back to committee if you have questions.
Okay, all right. We can send them to Kirk.
We'll take care of them for you.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Is there anything else?
Public Works, 5 minutes, please. 5 minutes.
Okay, all right. Meeting's adjourned.